Good afternoon, and welcome to the 2023 Spring Recital. The students have been working diligently and are excited to share their achievements with you today. Before we begin, we ask that there be no flash photography and that you take a moment to silence all electronic devices. Also, please know that we now have childcare available, which is located on the second floor. Marlene, our hospitality coordinator, is at the welcome desk and can help you locate the childcare room if you need assistance. As always, thank you for being here in person and online and supporting these artists as they grow in their skills and develop their craft. Our first piece this afternoon, which will be performed by our ensemble, is a new composition titled Sonatina. A sonatina is basically a little sonata, a piece of music in 3 movements. The sonatina you will hear today begins with an allegro, a light-hearted piece written by Shinichi Suzuki, the creator of the Suzuki method. It then proceeds into an andante, or slower, quieter section, then revisits allegro with a slightly elaborated conclusion. Our ensemble now offers Sonatina by Andrew Willis. Our first solo piece of the afternoon is a familiar tune. There has been debate over the years as to the original composer. Some have suggested Mozart composed it, but this is likely not the case. The idea that Mozart was the original composer probably arises from the fact that he did create 12 variations on the theme, which is actually French in origin. We will now hear Mazzy Linda play Twinkle Twinkle. Did you know that cuckoos lay their eggs in other bird species' nests to be raised by adopted families? Just a bit of useless knowledge for you. Cuckoo, a traditional German folk song, which one can surmise is about the bird of the same name, is a piece that somewhat mimics the cuckoo's call. The bird's call uses a descending major third, while this work utilizes a descending minor third to establish the theme. Lily Billups will now perform Cuckoo. Norwegian composer and pianist Edvard Grieg originally composed the next selection in 1875 for a scene in a play which depicts the rising of the sun over the Moroccan desert. Later, he would incorporate themes he wrote for the play into 2 orchestral suites. In addition to this, Grieg is regarded as a leading Romantic era composer and for giving Norway a national identity via his craft. Garrett Wills now presents Morning from the Peer Gynt Suite. The next piece was composed by Jeremiah Clarke. Clarke was an organist during the Baroque period at St. Paul's Cathedral in London. Originally, it was written for the semi-opera The Island Princess in 1699, and since has been an often heard wedding processional. Here to play trumpet tune is Nicholas Redman. Lord of the Rings film franchise has won many awards, as has Howard Shore's score that accompanies it. Other films you may have seen with music by this composer include Philadelphia, Mrs. Doubtfire, Hugo, and many others. Upon hearing our next piece, one can easily imagine Middle-earth and the serene landscape of the Hobbit village. Lily Billups will now take us to the tranquil setting of Hobbiton with her rendition of The Shire. Lightly Row is a traditional 1800s German folk song that tells the story of a boy who left home to go out into the world and would return 7 years later, which sounds a little like the hobbits and their journey in the last piece, although maybe not as fraught with peril. Henry Clark now presents Lightly Row. Czech composer Antonin Dvorak moved to the United States in 1892 to be the director of the National Conservatory of Music of America in New York. In 1893, he moved again to Spillville, Iowa, where there were many Czech immigrants, which helped ease some of his homesickness. This is also where he created one of the most recognizable symphonic works, a portion of which comes next. Reed Schenk will now perform Largo from Dvorak's The New World Symphony. following serenade is arguably one of Mozart's most well-known and catchy works, only gaining recognition after his passing. Scholars are not sure why or for whom he wrote the piece. There is no record of the first performance or information regarding its origin, only that it was created while he was working on his opera Don Giovanni. Josiah Cosner will now present Mozart's Eine kleine Nachtmusik. Instantly known from the first chord alone, the next selection is an audience favorite. Star Wars is a multi-billion-dollar franchise that has become an inseparable aspect of our culture for the last 46 years. The original soundtrack album became the best-selling symphonic album of all time, and the American Film Institute named it the most memorable score of all time for an American film. Here to take us on a galaxy far, far away is Nathan Ratzel. When the acoustic version was released in 1964, the next work initially saw little success. The following year, the song's producer, Tom Wilson, remixed the tracks, overdubbing electric instruments and drums. This propelled the song to #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in January 1966 and brought the duo back together to record another album. Here to play Simon and Garfunkel's countercultural hit, The Sound of Silence, is Tara Ratzel. Gene Kelly, Donald O'Connor, and Debbie Reynolds, this 1952 romantic comedy depicts three stars transitioning from silent films to talkies in the 1920s. When first released, it had modest success, but since is regarded one of the greatest musical films ever made. And who can forget the iconic scene where Gene Kelly sings and dances down the street through the rain? Wilma will now grace us with Singin' in the Rain. Our next selection this afternoon is a traditional spiritual which evolved from a handful of gospel songs in the early 1900s. Early versions of this song were stately and slow, but over time became more up-tempo and rhythmic. Many artists and composers have created their own versions of this work, adding to its worldwide recognition and its synonymous relationship with the jazz scene and the culture of New Orleans. Steve Ratzel, accompanied by Nathan Ratzel, now presents When the Saints Go Marching In. The text for the next work was written by Horatio Spafford, with music by Philip Bliss. It speaks of the resiliency of the spirit after a devastating loss. In 1871, Spafford lost his son in the Great Chicago Fire, and 2 years later, lost his 4 daughters at sea. Despite this, he was compelled to overcome these tragedies and see the positive. Matt Cole now presents a jazz interpretation of It Is Well With My Soul. Next, we will hear a piece from the 1725 notebook compiled for Anna Magdalena Bach by her husband, Johann Sebastian Bach. Many of these works in this collection were composed by J.S. Bach, along with works created by his children, colleagues, and friends. Scholars are highly doubtful that Bach composed this particular minuet that has been attributed to him, but that does not detract from the fact that he held it in regard and included it in the collection of music, a collection of music specifically created to aid in the education of beginning musicians. We will now hear Minuet in G major performed by Jack Linda. Born in New York City in 1898, George Gershwin started his music education at about age 10. 5 years later, at the age of 15, he left school to sell sheet music in department stores. He started to see success in 1920 after composing for Broadway shows, and from there, he would go on to compose Porgy and Bess, An American in Paris, and many more. It was his orchestral work, Rhapsody in Blue, that blended jazz and classical music in a way not heard before, that set him apart from other composers. Sadly, Gershwin passed away when he was only 38 years old, leaving us to wonder how a lifetime of his musical creations would have influenced the world. Today we are going to hear one of his works that is reflective of his signature style and an excellent example of early 20th century American classical music. This work utilizes syncopated Brazilian rhythms and chord progressions, giving it a strong jazz feel while bouncing from one idea to another. It may not sound adventurous to a modern ear, but this style of music was nearly unheard of to a 1920s audience. Andrew Willis will now present George Gershwin's Piano Prelude No. 1. Now is the time that we get to acknowledge all the hard work the students have put into their music. When your name is called, you may come forward to receive your trophy and then remain standing here by the piano as everyone is recognized. We do ask that you hold your applause until the end, at which point we will give a big round of applause to all the students. After the presentation, the students will gather at the stairs for photographs, and then you are invited to the parlor for treats and refreshments. Garrett Wills. Reed Shank. Nicholas Redman. Nathan Ratzel. Wilma Poindexter. Mozzie Linda. Jack Linda. Josiah Cosner. Henry Clark. Lily Billups. Matt Cole. Steve Ratzel. And Tara Ratzel. Have we missed anyone? Wonderful. Please help give us a big round of applause to all the students. We'll take photos.
We'll take photos right over here. So tall people.
Adults.
Hold on, let me see. Matt, Garrett, top row.
Top step.
Us and Sarah, top row. And then Wilma, I want you in the center.
There you go. Right there, man.
Right here.